plate of issues to dive into. This as President Biden and Vice President Harris are looking at some pretty bad poll numbers, both seeing a precipitous decline of their approval numbers. The administration struggling to respond to the surging Delta variant. We'll have more on that coming up. Also, a new report from House Republican Michael McCaul raises some red flags on the pandemic's origins. McCaul and the investigators from the House Foreign Affairs Committee say it's time to completely dismiss the wet market as the source of the outbreak, and as all roads now lead to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Let's find out what this means now and welcome in Newsmax White House correspondent Emerald Robinson. Now, Emerald, this is the Wuhan lab leak theory that some of us have been talking about for over a year now. What is so significant about this report? Some people might be saying, what took so long to get something so definitive? Looks like we're having some trouble there with Emerald's audio. I don't know if she can hear us or not. We'll try to get back to Emerald, and maybe I can ask that question to Republican Congressman Doug LaMalfa. Do we have Congressman LaMalfa with us? Okay, he's joining us now. Let's check in with Congressman LaMalfa to find out more about this. Congressman, thank you for being available. We'll try to get to Emerald in just a second, but I assume you have also seen this report from your colleague, Mike McCaul.
Yeah, I've seen an overview of it here. So far, it backs up that the Wuhan Institute here does seem to be part of a process that has allowed this to turn into the pandemic we have worldwide.
Are we past the point? I mean, again, like I was going to ask Emerald here, and she'll get into this in just a moment. But this is something that has been, if not proven, well known for or believed to be the most likely source for a long period of time. To some folks, it does seem like there's a bit of slow rolling going on this and getting this information out to the public.
Well, yes, because you have people involved in our own government here. I think Dr. Fauci needs to have a lot more questions asked about him, as well as others that are denying what has become very obvious to many of us for the past year. And so if we're not be able to dig deeper with Dr. Fauci and others in CDC or the WHO, then we need to move forward as if we already know what we do know and establish our protocols for protecting our country and its people from further action by a Wuhan-type institute or others, and be very, very wary of what China and the Chinese Communist Party really is up to with this.
But you don't think there's any way that, we're really going to get any clear answers from Dr. Fauci unless the dynamics in Congress change? I mean, if this is going to be, the atmosphere that we saw for the 1/6 Commission, it's not all that different right now when it comes to the politics of COVID. People are defending, on the Democratic side, people defend Dr. Fauci, regardless of what the data says.
I've watched Democrats in committees say, I love Dr. Fauci. So we know we're not going to get anywhere, probably through a congressional process, just like the 1/6 one, because they want to make that really Trump impeachment 3.0 when they're not willing to ask the questions about 1/6 of what did Mrs. Pelosi know? What did the police department know? What did the mayor know? What did all the people know on 1/3 or 1/2 about the possible threats to the Capitol at the time, yet did nothing because they didn't want to have bad optics over it?
Yeah.
So I don't see a whole lot of great answers going to come out of here because it's become so hyper political now that Dr. Fauci's got his defenders to the death and people on our side asking, what is the real deal here? And he's of course, this all coupled with flip-flopping on, the deal on the masks. 1 week it's one thing, another thing it's another. We have the head of the CDC actually coming out the other day and saying, well, if we can just get people to wear masks for 2 weeks and get the vax, then we should be able to flatten the curve. This is just recently.
Yeah.
So they're practically laughing at us here.
Well, I want to get back to what's going on with all that stuff in the pandemic in a second. I'll talk to Emerald. But with you, I want to turn our attention to talk about this infrastructure debate. If it is even a legitimate debate, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she's ripping into her own party, Democrats, who want to support this $1 trillion bipartisan bill. Here she is. Progressive left, these social Democrats, they are stomping their feet like a bunch of petulant children saying, if we don't get what we want, we are going to completely skewer this entire process. Do you think there was ever really a honest attempt from people like AOC and Nancy Pelosi to reach a deal here? Because it does seem like they're willing to let it all fall apart if they don't get what they want.
I sit as a member of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and for the last over a year, really, the issue has been to push as much of the Green New Deal aspect into that and other social programs into it. If you want to have a debate on the social programs and their funding, that's fine. Have it over here in its own column. What we're talking about, infrastructure already battles enough to try and keep money in that, to keep highway repairs going and the highway upgrades and the other things that are part of infrastructure. We have a lot of issue with flood control projects need to be done, especially like in Louisiana and some of the areas in my own backyard. Infrastructure needs to be infrastructure. And so to tie it to some gigantic spending bill that they don't even have an idea what there's going to be in it, they want to just authorize it through the budget reconciliation process and then start putting the meat on the bones of it sometime during September. The infrastructure bill that is done in the Senate so far is maybe it's an okay one. It's certainly better than what the House was going to put out. So it would be about $900 billion of spending, $350 billion already in the pipeline, already pretty much authorized. So we're adding $550 of new spending. So as long as there's quality work in there, I think that's something that we can have a good debate on. But to tie it to this $3.5 trillion pig in a poke, we don't know what it is, what they intend to do, and they want us to start putting meat on the bones maybe in September in order to spend their way to oblivion. That's completely, and it shows in our committee, and it shows here in the House how disingenuous the process is. They have to tie basically $550 billion of new transportation, new highway, whatever it's going to be, to $3.5 trillion of undefined pig in a poke money. We don't even know what it is.
Yeah, and I think there are a lot of people doubtful that they want to deliver here. They're more interested in the fight and, going down, dying, politically, so to speak, fighting for these things that they know they can never really get, but at least that way they can go back to their, base and say, we tried, as opposed to going for some sort of, deal, which isn't going to give them what they want. Now, I want to also talk about something that AOC said, called her Democratic colleagues cowards for not extending the eviction moratorium. Here's what she said.
The House and House leadership had the opportunity to vote to extend the moratorium. And there were many, and there was frankly a handful of conservative Democrats in the House that threatened to get on planes rather than hold this vote. And we have to really just call a spade a spade. We cannot, in good faith, blame the Republican Party when House Democrats have a majority.
So she's right about that. You can't blame Republicans for the failures here. But the eviction moratorium, Nancy Pelosi is tweeting that the CDC has the authority to extend the eviction moratorium. What ultimately happens here, Congressman?
Well, the CDC should not have any kind of authority to be governing property rights to begin with. The CDC giving them this kind of power, why have a Congress? Why have an elected body at the federal or state level? It's ridiculous to have that kind of thought. But let's take that a step back. How is it the job of Congress to be stopping eviction notices or any other way that private property is managed with a tenant-landlord relationship? That's ridiculous. Maybe at least knock it down to the state level or the county level and let that be determined. But we're way over the line even having any kind of a policy on evictions here. So absurdly, in the state of California, they had that in place. Now Governor Newsom, who's going to face his Waterloo here in about a month, is going to go ahead and backfill with taxpayer dollars, paying all those back rents for the people that haven't been paying them going along. Now, do we have a COVID problem? Certainly.
Right.
But had the COVID situation not been such a economy crushing, everybody has to stay home situation, there wouldn't be nearly this pile of issues to deal with, whether it's back rents or this bill. We wasted almost all day Friday waiting for the Democrats to put out an idea of what they want to do on the eviction moratorium. And I have to say to you as well, if we spent a little less time covering AOC and what she says on all across the media there, maybe we wouldn't have quite so much crazy policy coming out of this body here in Washington, D.C.
Well, it does seem, even though she's not the Speaker of the House, sometimes she does control the agenda. It does seem sometimes that Nancy Pelosi is reacting to her. And I think you're right. I think that's a fair point that, for someone, who's not in the Democratic leadership, she does get a lot of media time. But, we love to get the response from folks like yourself. It's a media creation. Well,
it's a media creation. All this is a media creation because she came in and upset a long-sitting Democrat who was a guy that we could at least talk to. And personally, I speak
Well,
with her not fine as person to person, but it's just this is the policy setter. And it was amazing back in the beginning when she came out with the Green New Deal.
Congressman,
Brand new, fresh.
I got to run here, but you're not completely wrong here. I do think there's some elements that does indicate she's a media creation here, but when it comes to the media these days, sometimes perception is reality. So here's where we are.
Not you all.
I got to leave. I got to leave you there, Congressman LaMalfa. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, let's check back in now with Emerald Robinson, who I believe can hear us at the White House to give us an update on that GOP report.
I can.
Hey, Emerald, there you are. All right, so we were just talking to Congressman LaMalfa about this, but this is information that's been widely available for a long time. And while this report is important and significant, some folks might be saying, what's taken so long to get something this definitive on paper and out to the public?
Sure. Yeah, a lot of this was available, but very underreported, and that's something that the ranking member on the House Foreign Affairs Committee says. That's Representative Mike McCall, and really what this is an addendum to his September 2020 report that gives a more fuller picture and narrative of how they see, based on their investigation, this lab leak potentially playing out based on what they say is evidence. Now, he also notes in this that based on what they now know and this investigation, McCall says it's now time to completely retire the wet market theory, that is not applicable. He also says that all roads lead to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And essentially what this report says is that McCall and his colleagues believe that this virus leaked from the WIV in late August or early September. After that, a cover-up by the lab and the CCP immediately ensued, with the lab taking its database of viruses offline and requesting more than $1 million in security upgrades, including a hazardous waste treatment system for a part of that facility, a facility that was less than 2 years old. Now, he also says that satellite data shows that there was an uptick in cases of hospitalizations with patients with COVID-like symptoms a month later. In addition to that, there were also members of the military who participated in the military games there around the world who started to experience COVID-like symptoms as well, and those countries from which they were from started reporting cases as early as November 2019. What he adds to this is a slam at medical professionals who is not specifically mentioned, but Dr. Tony Fauci, who suggested that they could not manipulate coronaviruses without being able to tell, that there would be markers for it. However, McCall says that what they found, that scientists have been able to manipulate these viruses without any indication since 2005, so for 14 years at that point, and that this specific lab had done it in 2016. What they are calling for is a full bipartisan investigation. They're also asking that Peter Daszak of EcoHealth Alliance be subpoenaed. That's the company that received funds from the NIH and sent them to the Wuhan lab. And they're also asking that Congress pass legislation that would sanction scientists at the WIV and CCP officials who were involved in the cover-up. John.
At the White House, Emerald, thank you so much. All right, coming up, outrage over the return of COVID lockdowns. We'll take a closer look at what's happening here in Florida. As local in Australia to enforce the COVID lockdown there, the government has deployed hundreds of soldiers to the nation's largest city. They have also attempted to reduce the latest lockdown. This is done to reduce the cases of the Delta variant, I should say. They also have helicopters serve Florida Governor Ron DeSantis when it comes to mask and vaccine mandates. Newsmax Miami correspondent Leonardo Feldman is here, and he has more on that. So, Leo, these local mayors, they are deciding to go against Governor DeSantis here.
That's right, John. I'm here in Key Biscayne. This is actually one of the cities that is defying Governor Ron DeSantis with implementing a new mask mandate in all of its government buildings. We do know that this decision came right after, hospitalizations broke a record here in Florida in terms of COVID. But what I can tell you is that the governor's office is saying that even though they're implementing this mask mandate, they're not going to be able to fine or charge or penalize anybody, because that would be breaking the law that Governor Ron DeSantis signed. I actually spoke to the mayor of this village, because it's a small village in Miami-Dade County. His name is Michael Davey, and he is a Democratic mayor who was once a Republican. And I asked him, how does he plan to enforce these new mask mandates? And this is what he had to say.
Well, that's a great question. Hopefully they'll be told not to. And we're also going to try and facilitate. If people don't want to wear a mask, we'll try and meet them outside. I think one of the things, with people coming in and doing permits, if they are against wearing masks, we probably will set somebody up outside so that they can be met. Because again, you're not required to wear a mask when you're outside.
And Key Biscayne is not the only village or city or municipality here in the Metro Miami area that is, implementing similar mask mandates. We do know that the city of West Palm Beach just implemented a similar mask mandate in all of its government buildings, and it's yet to see how they're going to enforce them.
Yeah, the enforcement component, an important aspect of this. And really, without it, Leo, it's just an honor system type situation. We'll see where it goes from here. Thanks so much. Leonardo Feldman for us in Key Biscayne down in Miami. Let's welcome in now Corey Mills. He is running for Congress in Florida's 7th Congressional District. He's also a combat veteran. Corey, great to have you with us.
Thanks so much for having me, John.
So what do you think about this? I mean, you hear about Orange County in Orlando implementing some new mask mandates. The mayor of Key Biscayne there. They're trying to I guess, split hairs, trying to figure out, well, they're not going to make the mandatory outside. They'll try to meet you outside if you don't want to come inside where you have to wear your mask. But what I think ultimately this results in is just more confusion for the average person out there just trying to do the right thing.
Well, again, it's just the Democrats on their power grab trying to say, oh, well, we're going to undermine the Constitution. We're going to undermine the governor's right to govern in the state of Florida. And again, you got people like, Chris Cuomo or any of the others who are trying to act as if, Governor DeSantis has done something so horrible, but yet there's 1,000+ people a day who are leaving New York to come to the free state of Florida and rid themselves of the socialist state of New York. So basically voting by their feet. So again, I think that they're trying to, play political optics here. I think that they're continuing to try and see how far they can overstep. And again, they have no enforceable law in which they can, reprimand, they can fine, or they can actually imprison or in jail any single Floridian who's following the governor's rules.
I want to focus on something that Chris Cuomo said on CNN. He accused Florida Governor Ron DeSantis of holding vaccinated Floridians hostage. Take a listen.
The majority of every group and demographic we have gotten vaccinated. How long do you allow them to be held hostage in states, let's say, like Florida, where, you have the governor saying, yeah, I know it's breaking out. We're going the other way. Don't Fauci this, my Florida, no mask mandates. I'll let the parents decide. I mean, where's that messaging going to get you?
I mean, I think we can look back to what happened the last time around here and the reluctance from Governor DeSantis to shut down the Florida economy. When, a lot of states that implemented these mask mandates the last time around, Corey, when we didn't have a vaccine, DeSantis clearly more concerned about that aspect of it, when Chris Cuomo is also, pigeonholing Republicans as the ones being responsible for spreading this. We've seen and heard public health officials say it's not just Republicans from red state America that are spreading this. It's happening in urban parts of the country as well, Democratic areas, and even people who are vaccinated not testing positive or getting sick as much as they are still able to spread the virus here. So maybe Chris Cuomo should double check his facts.
Well, John, I mean, again, why isn't everyone just pointing to the obvious statement? If we're so worried about COVID-19 spreads, then why do we have hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants who are going through our open borders with no mask, no vaccination, not being requested to do so, and yet they're going into states like Florida. They're going and being shuttled and bused and flown without an ID to other parts of the country. And then, lo and behold, here comes the Delta variant, then the Lambda variant, then the Psi-5 variants. And, what are they going to say then? Oh, we have to create a new vaccine because the original one has been proven not to combat Delta. Again, the people of the United States, just like with Germany and other countries, are seeing the facts here. The vaccine is being utilized to lock down government and lock down the people. It is being used to shut down the economy so that you can become dependent upon government, which is part of that socialist agenda. And you know what? Governor Cuomo, look what he did by actually killing off hundreds of elderly by sticking COVID-19 patients in the actual nursing home, but yet that's not being discussed by Chris Cuomo, his brother, is it? Governor DeSantis opened our economy, and that's why 1,000+ people from New York are fleeing and not being held hostage in New York and coming to the free state of Florida. So again, more pandemic rhetoric from the left and from the mainstream media. It's nonsense, John.
Yeah, I mean, there's almost 100% chance for some of these businesses to get killed by, the lack of business from COVID. And that's what a lot of people are looking at, too, when they think about, rumors of lockdowns again. Corey, another thing to talk about with you as it relates to 2022, Politico reporting that former President Trump and his political committees have brought in about $82 million during the first half of 2021. That's a lot of money, $102 million total in the bank. What do you think he's going to do with all that cash?
Well, I think he's going to continue to do what he's always done, which is to support candidates who lead an America First agenda. President Trump is still the leader of the Republican Party. He is still the leader of the conservative movement. He is looking at all of these rhinos that are out there, and even the Tinos, the Trump and name-only candidates, who basically tried to run and ride his coattails, but then ended up, voting for him when it came time for these phony collusion hoax type of impeachments. So I think he's going to continue to support the American people. I think he's going to use this money to ensure that America First candidates are able to win, and we're going to take back our nation and stop this socialist and Marxist movement.
Tinos, that's a kind of a new term, I think, for some. Any names you want to throw in there under that category, Corey, or we say that for another day?
We can say that for another day, but there's a long list I can throw out, John.
All right, we'll save it for another day. Corey, we'll see you soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, still ahead this hour, the rules for thee. Remember all those rules that we had to apply by, but the elected officials, some of them didn't have to apply. Well, it looks like they're coming back as we get ready to institute new mask mandates. The mayor of Washington, D.C., and Lori Lightfoot, the mayor of Chicago, had some plans this weekend that didn't involve masks. We'll talk about that next. Library, but maybe not safe enough when it comes to the violence there for his birthday bash, but not too concerned about the Delta variant either. Axios reporting that former President Obama is hosting his 60th birthday bash for himself on Martha's Vineyard at the $12 million Obama home there, which sits on 30 oceanfront acres. 475 confirmed guests will be there. Pearl Jam was set to play. Steven Spielberg also expected to attend, and I'm hearing there's going to be a COVID coordinator there to make sure everyone's following proper protocols. Let's welcome in now our guest list for today. Isabel Brown from Turning Point USA, also back with us. Dan O'Donnell from News Talk 1130 in Milwaukee, and Ari Hoffman, host of the Ari Hoffman Show on 570 KBVI in Seattle. All right, so Isabel, you're getting invited to President Obama's birthday party. Hypothetical situation here, and there's a COVID coordinator there. What do you do? Well, how do we? Is this the new reality we're all faced with? COVID coordinators at our birthday parties.
It may be a reality that politicians want to implement, but I highly doubt it will be a reality at the upcoming birthday party for our former president of the United States. Something tells me masks will not be enforced, social distancing will not be enforced, proof of vaccination likely won't be enforced. But the important thing to take away from this conversation, if you're watching today on Newsmax, is that the complicated messaging coming from our nation's leaders, particularly our politicians, doesn't make any sense and should cause you to pause and think for a moment about this double standard being applied to everything in society with COVID-19. They're telling you that you may be mandated to be vaccinated, but even vaccinated Americans can continue spreading the virus. They're telling you that masks, the data doesn't really support not spreading the disease and making sure that we prevent as much transmission as possible, but they are going to be required in many situations going back to school or going back to work this fall. There are countless examples of this throughout our entire experience with COVID-19. And now today in August of 2021, and none of it makes any scientific or logical sense whatsoever.
Yeah, all right, the same people who tell us we need a mask mandate, but after Lollapalooza and after the birthday parties, President Obama's going to have his birthday party as well. And I'm always struck by the 30 acres on the ocean front there. Again, same people that are telling you that we're all going to be underwater in just a matter of years. In this, to Isabel's point, this is why the messaging is so confusing, because these different rules, and we're right back to where we were in the height of the pandemic when it comes to the hypocrisy from some of these leaders.
100%. Also, I think we should start looking at tax returns for politicians once they leave office, given how much money that house cost. But I wasn't really ready for COVID season yet. I still have my riot decorations up, so this is a real bummer for me. Looking around at the complete hypocrisy on display, you've had more shootings in Washington, D.C. this weekend than you've had COVID deaths, and it wasn't even close. Meanwhile, look what's happening around the rest of the country with the violence that's going on. The Democrats don't want to address that at all. Instead, they want to shove us back into COVID land where they say, oh, you have to lock down or else. And meanwhile, they're not doing it. I think back to Washington State with Governor Jay Inslee's snitch list, where he had people reporting their neighbors for violating COVID. And what you actually saw when I did a public disclosure request for that list, you saw was a lot of people reporting people they had grudges with, reporting their competitors. It had nothing whatsoever to do with COVID. And also, we had these massive protests across the country, thousands of people involved in them, and those don't spread COVID. Now Lollapalooza doesn't, this wedding doesn't, and now they're not worried at all about what's going on down at the border, where you have hundreds of thousands of people streaming across the border, a 900% increase in COVID positive cases. And they're not concerned about that, but they're sending us back to our houses.
Right. And, again, Dan, a lot of people are saying, look, we're willing to do what it takes to try and get past this point.
Set wearing a mask? Come on. And then, of course, she goes and officiates a wedding at a hotel the following day, and she's pictured several times not wearing a mask. So if you're looking for any sort of consistency from leadership, you're not going to find it. What I found the most humorous about this, though, is that a number of Biden administration officials actually came out on social media and on the Sunday shows this past weekend to blast the traditional media, the Washington Post, the CNNs, the New York Times of the world, for creating COVID hysteria over the Delta variant, saying, look, it's not nearly as deadly. It's not a huge pandemic or huge threat for the vaccinated. So why are we focusing on the number of breakthrough cases, which are very small? All of this messaging comes directly from the CDC and the Biden administration. So now it seems that they're scared and upset with the media for scaring the public. Boy, that's irony if I've ever heard it.
I think the other thing, too, that's very concerning about this is we've seen the CDC and we've done the montages where they've said one thing and then the next month they say the other thing, Isabel. But what you see from a lot of our elected officials is they are deferring to the CDC on making decisions. You hear Nancy Pelosi say, well, it's up to the CDC, really. They should be the ones to extend the eviction moratorium. Well, we're only following what the CDC tells us what to do when it comes to mask mandates. But these are the people we actually elect to make these decisions, and they're the ones that are ceding this power to unelected bureaucrats.
That is so true. And the word unelected is very important in this conversation. Not once did any American citizen give permission to a scientist or public health official at the CDC to regulate what is or is not acceptable in our daily lives. My educational background is in the public health sciences. I have a master's degree from Georgetown in this very subject. And it's fascinating to me that at the same time, our society has said it is okay for public health to be the baseline reasoning for why we do or do not do anything. Public trust in our public health institutions is at an all-time low, not just with the CDC, but the World Health Organization, the National Institute of Health run by Dr. Anthony Fauci, and many other bodies in America and around the world as well. Public health is a statement that means absolutely nothing today because we've assigned it to everything in our society. And when you have individuals who were never elected making these policy decisions, I think that public trust is only going to decline further.
Yeah, I mean, it's hindsight's 2020, but you think about the need for preventative care, mammograms, and those types of things. And if those things were as widely available now as the tests and the vaccines, they're being pushed as hard as those things, where would we be, 10 years ago from a public health perspective? But Isabel's point is well taken. The authority of these public health officials has been diminished to the point where we don't see people responding to what they are telling us. And we need people in authority that Americans can trust. We don't seem to have that right now. All right, guys, stick around. We got more to come. Isabel, Aria, and Dan are coming back. We're going to check back in with everybody. We'll talk about the highlights and the lowlights when it comes to the Olympics. Also coming up, bacon could be in short supply. We'll talk about that story. Very concerning for bacon fans out there. We'll get to the bottom of that.